Module 4. And so we just covered the storylines, the conundrum of our existence, and this constant quantifying and qualifying. And the thing about stories is that you have characters, right? You create your avatars. We create people to the figment of imagination. Like I said, most of us want to be the hero. So we're going to make different people in our lives and throughout our lives like the villain, or we're going to make them the plot. And with that comes a lot of unforgiveness, because now we are able to have the story, I'm good and they're not. I was the bigger person. I rose above. And it's not that you're necessarily consciously saying that or thinking that. However, you will see that we strive to be on the good side of things, right? Or on the right side of history. Or we will be defensive if somebody, a loved one, a child, a parent, a sibling, a friend, if somebody tells us that, oh, well, you did this, we'll excuse ourselves or we'll reason why we went about it that way. And because we don't want to be the bad guy, or we don't want to be seen in any light that is not like good. And so we have a character to defend, to live out as good. And so in doing that, often we will create other people to be the plot or the villain, and we'll have unforgiveness. And then we'll go from our unforgiveness and kind of paint life, situations, circumstances, people as the culprit, as the plot to overcome or get over, or the villain to overcome and get over. And this all comes from this place of we're not able to forgive and get whole and complete with things and simply chalk it up to we're human and kind of like grow and develop from there. No, instead we'll develop the storyline of now I'm going to have boundaries and I'm going to wall up and, I'm going to label people. That's why even if we look at why we're struggling, if you look at mental health, we're struggling more than we ever have in history. We have levels of anxiety and depression that we've never seen before. And you think about medicine, technology, science. Every 3 months, they advance so much. If you look at where we were in the 1950s to where we are in 2025 regarding science, regarding medicine, regarding technology, not only have we advanced tremendously, but we're advancing as we go. What was true or significant today may not have been 3 or 6 months ago. But then when it comes to emotional intelligence, relationships, family, connection, we are so far. Our mental health is the worst that it's ever been. Why is that? It's because of these stories that we run. And so now we have all these reasons of offense and hurt and pain. Even the slightest things. We're resentful, we're bitter, we're defensive, we're walled in, we're keeping ourselves safe. And so all these things are coming because we won't let go of our storylines. We won't let go of creating something to be the plot or the culprit or the villain. So why don't we forgive? And why are we so infested in living in unforgiveness? Well, let's look at why do we forgive? And so at this part, when I used to do this as a workshop, I would have a huge whiteboard and I would draw a line in the middle of the whiteboard, and then I'd start people sounding off. And some people would say, well, you forgive because it's the right thing to do. You forgive so you could be the bigger person. You forgive so you could get rid of the poison. You forgive so it doesn't create a toxic environment within yourself. You forgive so you can move on. You forgive so you can let go and have peace. You forgive because that's what God does for us. So we want God to forgive us. So like a duty, right? We forgive because, one time I got 30 different answers, so I don't know how many I've called off today. With that said, I would get all these different answers. Anywhere from 7 to 13 was the average, with the common ones being to let go, to have peace, to move on, to not be binded to them anymore, to free your mind, like all these different reasons, right? And then I would always ask people, okay, is there anything else you want to add to this list? And people would look at each other, people would look at the whiteboard and be like, nope, they pretty much felt secure in their answers. And I said, are you sure? Does anyone want to add anything? And I would never get more answers. And I said, okay, everyone close your eyes. And then on the second side of the whiteboard that was blank, I would write two things. And before I had them open their eyes, I told them, take a deep breath. And then when they would open their eyes, they would see what I had written on the other side of the board. And you could literally hear a pin drop. Only one in the 9 years of doing this workshop, only once did somebody give me the answer. It was a 17-year-old young man. I remember that. I remember on another occasion, another young man was like upset. Why don't they teach me this in the church? It was really funny. But outside of those two young men, I would always get the same reaction. People were just like astonished. They were flabbergasted that how come, as a collective, with a room full of people, nobody thought of what I had up on the board. What do you think I had up on that board? What I would put on the other side of the board is we forgive to show them love, to give them grace. We forgive for love and grace, to love on them, to show them grace. Yes, you guys. I've had people from all backgrounds, all ages, different countries even. And I only got the to love on them one time. What does that say about our storyline? And where does that say about where our mental psyche is regarding relationships, connection? It's very hard for us to forgive because a lot of times the things that we have gone through, we think that if we forgive, we're saying that it's all right, that it wasn't that big of a deal. We feel like we're supporting or condoning their actions. I remember one gentleman one time when he saw the answer, he says, so that's it? They just get away with it? Right? So to forgive feels like we're letting them off the hook. Like we're saying it was okay. And that is not what we're saying. That is not what we're doing. A lot of people, one of the things I would ask, okay, so if you forgive to let go, to move on, is that conditional or unconditional? And people say, well, that's conditional. Okay. If you move on to be good with God or to be the bigger person, is that conditional or unconditional? And people would say that's conditional. I go, then you're going to get conditional moving on. You're going to get conditional peace. You're going to get conditional let go. You're going to get conditional favor. Because when you look at everything on the right side of the board, all of those reasons were always conditional. So you're not really forgiving. However, when you forgive to love on them, is that conditional or unconditional? And the rooms would always say unconditional. Then you're going to get unconditional moving on. You're going to get unconditional peace. You're going to get unconditional let go. When you forgive somebody to show them grace, is that conditional or unconditional? Again, that's unconditional. And so we get what we give. We often like to be understood, but we don't like to understand. And so to really bring this example home, I'm going to tell you about two different women that I have helped in their healing journey. One woman, she really struggled with anger and judgmentalness towards her mother. And the reason being is at a very young age, she was sexually abused. And one of the things that she wanted was to be free from this predator. And so her and her brother devised her mother actually walking into it, seeing it with her own eyes so that they could finally be liberated. Because up until that point, when she would share what was happening, the mother would accuse her of just trying to break her up and her new husband, or trying to break her up, or just causing problems. Even though the girl was 8, 9, 10 years old, her abuse went on from 7.5 to 11 years old. And so they devised the whole plan. The mom walked in, and due because of the guy standing up saying, "Well, I already paid my rent," she forewent and said, "Okay, well, you're going to sleep, outside in the living room. You can't sleep in the same bedroom anymore." And so this was still torturous to the little girl. And so she grew up to become a teenager and a young woman with a lot of anger. And it was not just that there was that one time of use, it was consistent. Um, Detectives once came out because somebody reported it. Something was that didn't feel right, and there was an anonymous report. And when the detectives came to investigate it, the mom beat the detectives to the school to tell her, "Hey, some detectives are going to come talk to you. When they come here, you got to let them know that nothing happens. Because if you do tell them, they're going to remove your siblings and you from our home, and we're going to be separated." And on top of that, what she was also fearing, the mom, is that she said, and they're going to take this person to jail, and their mother's going to find out that their son is in jail, and they're going to have a heart attack. And she will die of a heart attack knowing that her son is in jail, and it's going to be your fault. So, to a lot of people, that can be very frustrating, a lot of anger, a lot of rage. And that happens a lot with people in abuse, right? Where they feel that they were just swept under the rug or told to hush hush, or you must have imagined it, or you dreamed it, or that's not true, or that can't be true, right? And sometimes it's because it's a loved one that is being accused and they can't believe that, they can't fathom that. So that's their defense mechanism. For whatever is the reason, that feels very unfair and that feels very unloving to the person. And so this young woman grew up very angry, very upset, very walled off. And so through working, she came on the other side to full understanding and just release, and to really not only forgive, but come to an understanding that she had nothing to forgive. That's a whole other story. Okay. And so that's one woman, right? And so then in the workshop, I then said, then I have a second person that I worked with. And this person, was the eldest of 11. She basically was the eldest female of the children, and she was responsible. She was her mom's sidekick. Her mom was her everything, and she helped mom do everything, get kids off to school, clean, cook, everything. But on the last birth of the last sibling, the mom died giving birth. And she was from Mexico. And so in Mexico, they bury them right away and things move really fast. And so within 48 hours, all her siblings were dispersed to different family members. Some were given away, some were given to adoption, some were placed with different family members. So she goes from within 24 to 48 hours of knowing her life, of being with her siblings, of her mom, to just all of a sudden being separated. And the home that she went to ended up being a home that she was heavily abused in. And all she longed for is to be back with her siblings the way they once were. And she grew up with a lot of depression and a lot of hardship. Um, she didn't get the education because the family member that she was placed with made her like the nanny, made her like the maid. So her education only went as far as second grade. And so again, this is somebody that suffered a lot, had a lot of pain. And what do you guys think was this person's biggest fear? And right away, in all the workshops, usually people would say being separated. Yeah, she went through sexual abuse herself. She went through, hardships in different ways. She went through poverty, but the thing that really always stuck to her was being separated. That was one of her biggest fears. And so usually everyone can be like, understand how hard it was for her to forgive her father for separating them all, how hard it was for her to forgive the people that gave her a harsh living. And at the end, what I would say is the mother, the person of the separation, is the mother of the other girl. And all of a sudden, you could just see the room of people like, OMG, like, okay, it kind of makes sense. Still doesn't make it right that she allowed her daughter to go through that. But now it starts to make sense where a lot of her fear came from. You look at the lack of education, you look at the fear, you look at the anxiety of not being separated. And when you start to see these different things, there was just so many more moving parts. Again, it doesn't make it right. Now, that story is of me and my mother. I am the young girl that was abused from 7.5 to 11. And I was very angry for a long time. As I really sat with myself and just showed her love and showed her grace, I came to a point that I really understand. And it's not like pathology where like I just excuse her because she's my mom or whatever. No, I just really came to understand that when you understand, I love the study of anthropology. When you really start to understand neurology, biology, all these different things that make up the human being, and you start to understand the nervous system and how there's certain things that you will stop or deny or telling yourself or be able to see because it would give you a psychotic breakdown. So now when I really went into like, what kind of mom does that? And I really went to ask the question and get understanding, I'm like, OMG, she was trying to avoid a psychotic breakdown. She was trying to avoid, well, what do I do if I'm not working? And then my daughters are going to be taken away by my husband, right? So there's so many moving parts that I really got to understand. And most of us don't seek to understand because we are in our feelings. Rightfully so. Rightfully so. So this can get a little, this is where it gets a little bit sticky for people because you have your own stuff that you've gone through. And it could feel like I'm trying to have you bypass or gloss over your experiences. That is not what I'm doing. For me to be talking about this so nonchalant the way I am today, this was years and years of work, of anger and hate and hurt and pain. So I'm not glossing over. I'm not bypassing. I'm not being pathological about it. But what I am sharing is that we can get free, that we can know peace that surpasses understanding. To the extent that when my daughter celebrated her quinceañera, she had this amazing quinceañera in Disneyland and all these different details about it that were just magical. And when I asked her what was the favorite part of your quinceañera, she gave me two. One of them was when you called up mom, my mom, when you called out grandma and you gave this speech about how she's the matriarch and how we owe her just being such a close-knitted family. That was one of my favorite parts. How I'm able to love my daughter and my mom and understand is how I modeled and showed my daughter energetically how to love and understand me. So the gift is not just for my mom, the gift is for my heart, my existence, my being, and my daughters and everyone before it, because we cut the head of the snake of whatever all that was, all that pain before us. And that's available to us. But it's not an easy walk. And it just doesn't happen from one day to the next. But it's really good to start knowing that that's available when we cut ourselves away from stories and she's a villain and she's the bad one. And now I could do a whole platform. I could do a whole business on that story alone. And I could defile my mom. But then we lose like the availability of truth, living and love and expansion and growth and evolution. We get to evolve and stop passing on. This is why history mimics. This is why history repeats itself because people are upset and then somehow they recreate from the same anger carrying in their heart, the same disdain in their heart. And that's why we won't change our legacy because we are in our unforgiveness, we are in our judgmentalness. And I'm not saying that you don't have a right to it. I'm just saying, does that give you the love? Does that give you true peace and happiness? And you don't even have to maintain a relationship. I'm not saying that either. There is some places where, but you can get whole and complete in your heart. And that is a journey. I'm not saying that this one share or this video should get you to move because that's definitely not how it happened to me. And once you bring forward that forgiveness and you cut your ties with everything that has been, the potential and possibility of everything that's possible comes forward. Because now you're not stuck in that storyline, and that somehow we keep self-prophesizing and recreating with our own kids and their kids with their kids. And this is why alcoholism exists. This is why poverty is generational. This is why incest is generational. This is why, you know, diabetes, just different things. Everything's generational because of that. But we could start a new generation. We could start a new thing that is not a story, but that is a saga. Saga is stories that are epic and legendary because you can curate with the potential and possibility of everything when you free yourself from the hands of the past. When you really let go of past, now you can get present and create a future that very few have ever known.